Secret wars in the American wilderness. Kind of a case spooky threat, but also kind of serious. The American interior is massive. There are countless regions where the human population officially is zero for hundreds of square miles, even thousands. While we've all heard and have enjoyed stories of cryptids and such things as wendigos and stuff like that, my curiosity shifts more to the realistic, albeit still surreal possibilities that these regions could be host to everything ranging from organized crime, running things such as drug labs, to outcast groups, either politically or religiously motivated, or just arranged to live out in the middle of nowhere. This possibility leads my imagination into wondering, what if it is true? What if there could be straight up organized crime groups waging guerrilla warfare against each other in the middle of nowhere, with even the US military being involved, either sending in special forces to kill them and wipe out any evidence to keep the public in the dark, or even funding them, CIA style. There could be firefights being waged right now and nobody would know, other than those directly involved in said firefights. The possibility gets even stranger when you factor in weird mystery stories of experienced hikers with years to decades of experience going missing just for the search for these people being conducted in very weird ways, with even Army Special Forces getting involved, searching areas blocked off from local law enforcement to find them. What does Kay think about all of this, and what theories or stories do you guys have to share? Also, just a general spoopy threat because why not? Would it be kind of pointless to have guerrilla warfare between criminals way out there when they can instead have it in the nearest big city? I wouldn't be that surprised if a lot of stuff goes through the Everglades though. It would be pointless to fight in these areas since they pretty much hold no real value. Crime families and gangs fight each other to get valuable territory and trade routes, hence why they often focus so much on the cities, since that is where the high value territory is for them. The only time you will have rogue groups in the woods are usually schizo cults. The city guerrillas would need their supply depot somewhere, with even larger bases in ever more remote areas. Note that cartels do have tanks. Their enemies could then find out about them and hit them, which would necessitate defense structures and forces, retaliatory strikes, etc. Bam, wilderness warfare. Get any cults involved, get any inbred hicks, get special forces training parties, get a lot of imagination, and you probably get what OP describes. There were training camps belonging to the Contras and/or satanic cults, both propped up by the CIA, in the Everglades during the 70s and the 80s. Would need their supply depots. What is a trap house? Guys, doing organized criminal stuff in some city like Detroit, Baltimore, or Chicago are not going to go all the way out into the boonies to store stuff when there is plenty of abandoned shacks that they can use for that in basically every major city they can store and do their stuff in. Long travel times, like you get if you stored your stuff in a woods, increases the risk of being hit on the move. Combating gangs that use abandoned properties is part of why in Detroit, they've been trying to tear down old abandoned buildings for years and years. But there is always more, and there are always places the cops flat out just do not go. What you're going to see outside the cities is almost entirely smuggling and things related to that. They are going to be desperately trying to avoid detection by anyone, not just rivals, when they are doing it. Starting a big ass firefight on an important corridor used by basically everyone to move stuff, causing the cops and feds to show up, just isn't going to mess things up for your enemies and can end up putting a few extra targets on your back. Manufacturing illegal drugs on a mass scale necessitates a large operation that you would not be able to hide in the city. You also have areas in the US where transporting from Mexico to those areas is just too far. Same reason why Ford manufactures their stuff in Mexico, while Toyota manufactures their stuff in the US, because it's just too far to transport across an entire ocean. As a cartel, or as some locals who want to compete against a cartel in said areas, your only move is to manufacture on a large scale within that region, which would require your operation to be located very far away from any prying eyes. They don't usually have one depot in case it gets hit. Instead, It's usually distributed into smaller depots. They may have one dedicated reception area where the drugs come in from out of town, state, country, i.e. a warehouse near the port, or a garage near a freeway, but then it's moved to another place. It could be a small mom and pop bakery. It could be a house. It could be anything that they want. Usually, it's just a house or an apartment. They can move them too, of course. Experienced hikers with used to decades experience going missing. I really think a lot of this comes down to just a few things. The Park Service does not want to admit that murders happen in national parks because the Park Service really tries to keep the perception up that parks are safe and healthy, which, mathematically, they are, but still. Not to mention, police don't really want to deal with park crime scenes or the jurisdictional issues that could occur in parks with overlapping states and federal/state areas. What are you going to do? Get footprints from all 1,000 people who walk the park. Dust the trees for prints. Many experienced hikers may just be wandering the same few hikes or trails and wind up getting lost or separated anyway. It really does not take that much to get lost. See above, but they may be hikers who just overestimated their abilities on a deep hike and got lost in the American interior and died of exposure, making odd choices along the way to shed weight, or due to confusion, hypothermia, limb springs that limit mobility, etc. Mountain lion attacks may just be more prevalent than usually recognized, which are about the only ambush predator in the US that could silently murder you and drag you off from a camp at short notice. Less likely though. Honestly, I think a lot of people just overestimate their skills or get lost entirely. There have been some shooting skirmishes between cartel growers and Hmong growers working for the Chinese in Northern California, but that is just one group raiding a rival group's grow, and not really a war. Cartel growers raid each other all the time too. They've gotten in shootouts with agents as well. My curiosity shifts to the more realistic, albeit still surreal possibilities. We know drug cartels have farms and labs for sure. Claymores, mines, alarms, and Mexicans are deep in the woods, usually near deep wilderness streams and springs. Lone men out living in a cabin or dugout have been found over the years. When it comes to the cartels, you'd really want to be kitted up and masked, as there will be trail cams watching the area. Even if you wipe them out, they might come calling next week at your mom's house. Lone men likely have zero to lose and zero for you to gain by messing with them. If you rob a cartel of 4 kilos of meth, how are you going to sell it? Not to the cartels and not go to prison. The 3 rusty AKs and 2 Baofangs worth combat. Go deep and build your own stuff. To be fair, I think finding and offloading any drugs from a cartel wilderness camp are the hard parts, but actually knocking one over wouldn't be too hard with a group of like 5 to 6 guys, NODs, and some training or planning. Not sure it would be worth the investment either, but it is doable. There is a national forest nearby that might as well be occupied by a mishmash of law enforcement because of the craziness. I've seen a Black Hawk heading in that direction and suspected it was some sort of raid. When I was in high school, in criminal justice class, we had a Forest Service officer come in and talk to us about how there are cartel grow-ops staffed by what are basically slaves throughout the Appalachians. The guards here are told not to let any witnesses live, or else their families are killed. Also, never expect for there to be privacy out there. The woods are chock full of cameras, unless you're really, really out there. Dude showed us a still of a guy's ass pressed up against his Jeep's window because he was having a redneck romp with some tramp by a road out there. It just seems so easy to get away with anything once you're off the beaten path by a ways. Who would be out there to check it out? Cartels have moved grows to Appalachia. I thought that was strictly a PNW thing. It's barely Appalachia, but it's a pretty open secret in Ohio that there's pretty significant grow-ops deep in the woods of Hocking Hills to serve the appetite of OSU and OU. The old adage of an experienced carpenter will cut off their finger before a novice does comes to mind. While living in Arizona, I lost count of the times I'd see an experienced hiker went missing in XYZ mountain range, and it later to be found out that said hiker decided they were hot stuff and would pack less gear so that they could challenge themselves. Not sure if I can find the news article, but one that comes to mind was a guy who went hiking on a trail in the superstitions and decided that he would be able to navigate it without looking at trail maps. Was found a few weeks later with javelinas and yotes ripping his corpse apart. Seriously, those kit recommendations in hiking books are usually written in the blood of several men. Follow them, or the great mother will rip you apart and laugh. If you bother to read the accounts of those who almost ended up missing, it's clear that whatever it is not connected to human activity at all. Animals can detect spooks at a much greater range than humans. You can make yourself unpalatable to evil spooks by smelling of flowers and herbs. For example, carrying something that smells strongly of mint is an excellent idea. Spooks can, supposedly, be seen with generation-free night vision devices. Such infrared-only spooks are always evil. Spooks exist in different frequency bands, which our eyes interpret as color. The rule of thumb is higher frequency, the better. A spook that is blue is far less likely to harm you than a spook that is only visible in infrared. The presence of a blue spook, or even better, an ultraviolet spook, is also likely to discourage red and redder spooks from being present. I'd love to see some basis for this, real or not. It's an interesting concept. I have done a lot of reading and analogs of the paranormal critters and things American outdoorsman encounters are found described in sources dating back to before written history, beginning 5,000 years ago. The problem is that these sources are pagan sources, and America is a Christian fundamentalist country, so they are disregarded as superstition. I have also started to suspect that some of these critters are neither primitive nor dumb, as in that they actually post here on 4chan. Sometimes anons are making cryptic posts that means nothing unless you understand how their world works. Before written history, i.e., if my grandpa's grandpa did it this way, then it must have been how things were at the beginning of time. I've wandered the deepest deep part of scary woods and seen the army training exercise signs. There's a whole lot of actual nothing going on out there, OP. The singular time I've ever been way more aware and worried about something happening is deep mountain snowmobiling, simply because weather, avalanche, getting stuck, or rolling a sled onto yourself are all incredibly real dangers, and you are in the middle of nowhere, halfway up a mountain, in a blizzard if you mess up. Fun stuff though, but for real, I rarely see moose, let alone anything scarier. Definitely no secret wars, but everyone in the big empty parts of the country are armed with a smile, polite wave, and usually a whole posse, because safety in numbers and all that. There was a hot second when I lost my dad hiking back from Corona Arch outside of Moab at night without a light. I swear I heard him call me and saw movement in the corner of my eyes, but there was nothing. I was just freaking out a little bit and pushing my senses to find any clues, which made me think random noises in the stillness were actually my father calling me. Would not surprise me at all. Since this is basically an X-thread, I've started irregularly doing patrols of my property in full autism battle rattle, NODs, thermal monocular, the good ammo and plates. Started setting up trail cams too. Haven't ever caught anything beyond the usual wildlife on them, so that is a plus. Few too many unexplainable occurrences since I started living here. Haven't told a soul about this stuff yet, and I've got more, but these are the ones that really stand out to me. The first, be me, just messing around on my property, doing some chores, and cleaning some stuff up. Turn my head. Brightest light I've ever seen in my life. Like looking into the damn sun with a magnifying glass. Have the worst headache I've ever had in my life. Throw out repeatedly. Disoriented. Likely need to lay down and chug water. Felt both of my legs lock up in a full-on Charlie horse. It took me a while to limp home that day. The second, be me, fixing the posted signs on my property. Hear a psst, anon, in my wife's voice. I look around for a minute. Nothing. Go back to traipsing in the woods to inspect and repair signs. Hear it again. Anon, hey, anon. This time louder. Call out to her. No answer. Dead quiet, and the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Absolutely not. I took my stuff and went straight home. My wife was in the living room, doodling on her tablet. I tell her that there might be hobos on the property, so bring a gun if she ever decides to go out. The third, be me LARPing. Think I'm sick as hell, as I'm running drills on targets that I set up in front of some of the larger trees near the woodline. Getting pretty good times. Go to reload my magazines and take my eyes off them for just a minute. They were not in the same damn place that I had set them up. Some of them were a couple yards closer to where I've got the table set up, and some were actually in the woods, with a few partially behind the trees. I waited a couple days to take them down. I'm gonna level with you and on. Outside of the first one, which sounds more like a stroke, you have been describing textbook symptoms for paranoid schizophrenia. You should go see a doctor and tell them about your experiences. Most likely, he was in some dimly lit quiet woods and thought, dude, what if I saw a skinwalker, like in those spooky Greentext? That would be so awesome right now, and basically tricked his own mind into interpreting forest sounds as a paranormal because he wanted to. As someone who may have had an actual combat encounter with a Wendigo or a skinwalker or some kind of paranormal thing, I have experienced too. As for experience 1, I have seen weird orbs of light at night in the middle of nowhere. This was during the combat encounter, and have had the moon mysteriously turn red a few times. Of the 2 times it turned red, like blood red, the first was with the skinwalker fight, and the second was in the middle of the desert at night. But I got the same vibes from the combat encounter. If you read Native American lore, you will find that they had the custom of field names different from their regular names. It seems that these things were regular happenings to them. I have also read stories about American outdoorsmen encountering similar things. Furthermore, if we go by Native American lore, the Bigfoot and other kinds of spooks can leave behind images of people that they abduct. They can also turn themselves into trees or boulders. Spooks are psychic and can read your surface thoughts. That's probably why that spook shifted your targets. Supposedly, gold can block psychic emissions from your brain. I suspect a gold-coated copper might work too. When I was homeless and on drugs, I was around doing similar stuff. I was a junkie, but mostly stopped that by becoming a meth head. I lived in the woods for a while with a bunch of other people. Not deep in the middle of nowhere or anything like that. We were off some deep hiking trails is all. I was just a homeless meth head who had gotten out of one crappy situation and into another, somewhat less crappy one. Most of us were like that to one degree or another, but there were others who were not. They weren't really a part of any group, just hanging around the edges or whatever. They did weird stuff, kinda like that, and more. They liked messing with people, and it seemed really evil. We did drug addict stuff, but they did stuff because they wanted to, and because they could. Looking back, I don't actually think they were addicts, or even using really. I wish I could remember more, or be more clear. I get them mixed up with when I started seeing Bigfoot, but I don't know if they're connected. I lived in 2 different spots in the woods when I was using. Being out there was a little better than being on the streets, because we did not get hassled as much. You see some weird stuff when you're a meth head in the woods, but one night, I woke up when I heard some rustling. I thought someone was stealing my stuff, so I jump up and see a huge, hairy guy poking around the edge of my area. When I yell, he makes this really weird groaning noise and runs off. I spend the rest of the night sorting and resorting my stuff to make sure it's all there. After that I'd see him, or I guess maybe another one, off in the distance watching or whatever. I never saw him from the trails or anything, just once I was back into the woods. But also, those weird guys would do messed up shit a lot of the time and be moving around like that. They never directly messed with any of us, but I'd see them going deeper in the woods or hanging out by trees and stuff, like just sitting there. One time, I was sucking someone off, and I look up, and one of these guys was just sitting in a tree watching, but he had to be up there before I went there and started. Now these are my type of threats. Never had anything happen while I was serving, but I've had my fair share of stuff. Be on an off-road camping trip, Jeeps, and that one Ford that always has problems. Spend day hunting while everyone else helps to fix the crappy Ford. Bag a deer, gets thrown in Ford since it is the only pickup. Nighttime comes, and we notice one of us trailing very slowly behind. Not answering on CB, suddenly no more lights from him. All stop, grab lights to see what the hell happened. No truck, no signs of him anywhere. Shouting, yelling, and still dead silence. No motor noise, just dead silence. Camp there till morning. Find truck and guy. Drove off the path and hit a ditch. Bed of truck is nothing but blood and half a deer. Very clean cut, even for bone. Leave Ford, since it is stuck in a huge ditch. Continue trip, everyone trying to ignore the whole deer thing. 40 miles towards our campsite, suddenly, lead stops. Hear on CB from lead, something about a deer staring him down. We all walk up to see over half of our deer. It's just lying in the path, with its head just staring straight at us. Noped so hard. We haul ass, no slow going, enjoying trail. Beating the piss out of every vehicle, speeding up an old riverbed, get to campsite, and just spend all the night wondering what the hell just happened. Plan to head out at dawn, and just get out as soon as possible. Whole day driving back, come to spot where the deer was, just completely gone. Don't stop, and just keep going. Get to where the truck fell in the ditch, no truck. Get back to closest town, and just nope. We stay at buddy's house, still noping. Knock on door. Local police found his truck on fire. I have no idea at all what the hell happened, and I will never go anywhere near that trail whenever I'm in Florida. I have been on that trail 20 plus times and never had a problem every time I go down to visit him. Got some spooky stories, rumors, first-hand accounts, and my own personal experiences from my time spent living in Fargo, ND/Moorhead, MN. Fargo and Moorhead is split by the Red River, one of the only rivers that flow north. Every year, a body or two is pulled from the river. People thinking they can swim in it. People taking their own life, and usually just a drunk college student who wandered a little too close and was swept away by the deadly, unseen current. But there's been rumors of foul play. Some locals even going so far to say that the Smiley Face Gang is involved. I myself have seen one of the notorious Smiley Faces along the bank, but I don't know how much I read into all that. Between Fargo and Moorhead is an old railway bridge that is no longer in use. The local homeless population have used it for decades, as it provides a substantial amount of cover, both physically and visually. A couple homeless people have recounted to me similar stories from under that bridge. They both report that they woke up in the middle of the night, looked over near the water of the river, and saw a lone woman standing there, watching them. One says she had red eyes, the other does not. They both decide to ignore her, chalking it up to another junkie, or just a weirdo, as the FM area are full of them. When they open their eyes again, mere seconds later to check back on her, she is much closer, and a feeling of danger washes over the men. One of them tells how he woke up his friend, and they hightailed it out of there as the friend saw her too. The other says he tried to stay as long as he could, but she kept getting closer to him, and he eventually ran away. There were some written accounts of this woman out there on the internet that are similar to these accounts told to me. All stories from locals and myself will be told from a first-person perspective. The first street you reach as you enter Moorhead from Fargo on Main Avenue is a one-way that goes about 15 blocks south. There is one park near the beginning and another at the very end. Be me, going from Fargo into Moorhead to pop by my mom's house. Late at night, 12 a.m. to 2 a.m.-ish. Multiple occasions, skateboarding or walking. Have to go down long one way each time. Always get a bad feeling going past the first park. Would often see an absolutely enormous black dog sitting on whatever side of the sidewalk I was going down that night. Bright yellow eyes, unmoving, The breed looked like a Sheltie, but all black and just big. I would always cross the street as to not pass by it. Its head and eyes would follow me. One time, I saw it stand up and start to walk towards me. Would have stood up and touched the shoulders of an 8-foot man. Nubbed hard AF. One time going to Mom's house, taking that one way. Skating hard, one headphone in, one headphone out. Cross past the park, feel a gust of wind pass at my back. Hear the rustling of nails on concrete. Look behind me to see the black dog sprinting across the street. Swear, I felt it graze my back. It tried to dash at me, but I was a foot ahead. Never skated so hard in my life. 3 railroads run through downtown Fargo. Near the river is a walking path that runs right next to one of the railways. You just walk up a 5-foot incline and you're on the tracks. Multiple people have died in what is essentially the same spot, next to the railroad. One man was murdered there. Another was struck by the train while drunk. A third died with seemingly no reason. The day before the third man died, I was taking a bike ride down said path early in the morning. I found the corpse of a large black dog, unrelated to the black dog in a prior story, dead. It smelled pretty horrendous down the trail and absolutely scorched the nostrils when you got up on it. Its head was detached, did not look like it was ripped or torn or sawed off, just was off. Clean and precise and no blood on the ground. Flies filled the air and dotted the corpse of the dog. I looked for a second after realizing what I was looking at, and then I dipped. The man's body was found the next day, around the same time in the morning that I found the dog, found by a jogger walking her dog. Be a small town near Savannah. Town has a local legend about a ghost light that moves up and down a track. Locals stay away for the most part, except for thrill-seeking teenagers. I arrive in the mid-afternoon and make my way to the county sheriff department. Outside parked in his black car is my contact. He is a lanky old man who constantly has a cigarette in his mouth. We exchange pleasantries, and he leads me inside, where I'm brought to a room used for integrations. Inside is a detective and another man. My contact leaves, and I get to work. The detective introduces me as an analyst from the GBI to the other man. The middle-aged Hispanic man squints at me and nods. I already told you my story over and over, man. Look at the tape and tell me if I'm full of crap or not, he says to the detective. I sit down and introduce myself to the man, telling a lie in the process to keep with the detective's story. The Mexican man scoffs and pounds his cuffed hands on the table. I didn't do anything. Look at the tape, asshole. I begin his interview and start by asking him about the tape. He was referring to the CCTV footage of the railroad where he works. From the briefing I received from my contact, I was aware that the mangled body of an 8-year-old girl was found on the tracks. The man in cuffs worked for the railroad and was instructed by the local law enforcement to gather up all the CCTV footage from before the incident. I am also aware of the fact that this man is a suspect in her death. Turns out, detectives had did a sweep of the area and found a shack in the woods about a few dozen yards from the track. In there, they found evidence that someone was being held against their will. From the toys and size of the chain and collar, it was determined to be a young girl. They found some things linking the men in custody to the shack. The detectives had the accusation that the man was holding the girl against her will to assault her, but she broke free and was hit by a train in her escape. The theory had much more weight behind it when they discovered the man destroying hundreds of hours of CCTV footage. The suspect was fiddling in his seat. I moved the talk towards the topic of the tape he's claiming will prove his innocence. He leans forward in his chair. They have it here. Make them show you. I lie and tell him I will, but first, I need him to give me his account of what's on the tape. His posture tenses up, and he begins to tell me aside. He was collecting the video footage as the police had requested, but stopped when he was on the feed that was from about 3 a.m. the night before the body was discovered. He said he saw on the tape the girl run from the woods to the tracks. She looked disheveled and panicked. I noticed he had a look of satisfaction when he said that. He continued to say the girl rested on the tracks for a bit to catch her breath, but in the footage, you see a bright light off in the distance. The girl then gets up and looks towards the light that's coming closer. She does not get off the tracks and waves towards the light getting closer to her. The man looks me in the eyes and says, "You won't believe this, but man, the light was in the center of a black cloud, like the size of a dog." He said he saw on the tape that the black cloud floated a few feet off the ground. It had a bright light in the center of it. The mass floated towards the girl, who didn't move, like she was frozen in place. The next thing he saw on the footage was the light glow so brightly that the screen was white for a few moments. After clarity had returned, the body of the girl was on the tracks, torn up and chunks missing like she had been mauled and partially eaten. The detective beside me let out a snarl and spit in his cup. That's his bullshit story, but where the fuck is the tape? The cuffed man bangs his hands on the table. I gave it to you cocksuckers. Y'all have it, you bastards. I did not do this, man, please. Feeling like my job had been accomplished, I excused myself from the room as the discussion between the other two men became heated. My contact was outside the door waiting for me. We exchanged forms and paper, then I made my way out. Officially, the story was a runaway Jane Doe was accidentally hit by a train. The suspect was found hanging in a cell a few days after I had left. A fence was put up around the tracks with no trespassing signs. All CCTV cameras were removed. According to a colleague of mine, there was a tape recovered, but it had went missing around the time the suspect was found to have taken his own life. There was no train scheduled to make its way down those tracks at the time the girl had allegedly got hit.